Welcome, everyone. Want to introduce today's guest, Stephanie Rising. Stephanie, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Stephanie, I want to start by giving you an opportunity to tell us a little bit about yourself and your business, The Rising Effect, and what you do in working with business owners.
Well, I celebrated my 14th anniversary this summer. I have been in practice since June 1st of 2006, and I am a small business coach. So my area of expertise is working with family-owned businesses, partnerships, solopreneurs, and I picked that rather than corporate executive coaching just because I'm really drawn to the complexity of small businesses. I think that when you're a small business owner, that line between what's personal and what's business is very blurry. And that blur is what makes it really exciting and interesting, and also sometimes very stressful if you're the owner.
Right.
So I like being part of that and helping people navigate that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Stephanie, Anthony, and I are CPAs, and we work with, the demographic that you just mentioned with respect to small businesses, solopreneurs, and we could definitely attest to the fact that there is a blurry line between, business and personal, and
Yeah.
we see that all the time. So it's great to hear that there's someone out there like you that's providing that coaching to really help those business owners, take it to the next level.
Yeah, because it does take
Thank you.
guts, and it can be stressful. It can be extremely rewarding, as you probably know, in working with these folks, Stephanie. But it's definitely with its challenges. So
Yeah.
along those lines, we had talked to you kind of ahead of time to try and get a sense for some of the kind of hot topics or hot button issues you tend to encounter a lot when working in that coaching capacity or that consulting
Mhm.
capacity with business owners. And one of the things you identified right off the bat is kind of these challenges related to time management for the
Yes.
small business owner. And I know, you wanted to share, maybe in your experience, what some of those challenges that business owners face are related to time management and some of the strategies that you either coach them on or you've encountered people using that are effective. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, you bet. I think as a small business owner, and especially for sole proprietors out there, we're always wearing the hat of butcher, baker, and candlestick maker. And so trying to figure out how do you make time for all the things that you have to do in order to run your business, and then all of the things that you have to do in order to bring revenue to that business. And if you have employees, what do you do to manage the employees? So it's constantly changing gears. And one of the things that I encourage my clients to do is to think of time management as directly related to energy management. There are some people who start the week really strong, and then, by noon on Friday, they're running on fumes. I mean, I am one of those people. And then there are other people who start the week really slow, and they build and they gain energy and they finish the week really strong. Some people are better in the morning. Some people are better as the day wears on, and they're more night owls. And I think that one of the things that I see often that sets people up for frustration is they're trying to put themselves in one particular, like one size fits all time management box rather than going with the flow of their own nature. And to a certain extent, you have to adapt depending upon what the market expects of you. I
Sure.
mean, if you work for a bank, people expect certain hours that you're going to
Yeah.
be available, and like 11 o'clock at night is not going to be one of them. Um, Although maybe some people would prefer that. But I think what's really helped me manage my own time and my own practice and everything that I have to get done as a solopreneur, and an exercise that I've done with many of my clients, regardless of the size of their business, is it's very simple. I make a table word. And across the top, I have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And along the side, I have week 1, 2, 3, and 4. And once I make that table, I start filling in everything that's I call not negotiable. These are fixed things that happen every single month, like clockwork. And based on how many obligations I have in a single day or over the course of a week, I have a better idea of when I can schedule project work and client meetings versus when I'm going to have other obligations.
Right.
And it's helped me to balance my time and my energy in a way that's more reasonable rather than just everything being some mad dash where you shoehorn in as much as possible and then you're disappointed at the end of the day that you couldn't get a superhuman amount of work done. I think that just sets people up for frustration. And the other thing that I encourage people to do is start the week working on your own business. I do not meet with clients on Mondays. And I kind of follow the same advice that they give you on the plane, which is you put on your own oxygen mask first before you start assisting other people. And I used to schedule all of my own stuff on Fridays when I was at my most tired and worn out and I was playing catch up from the week. And what I've noticed is that by doing my own business development and my own coaching and whatever I have going on to make sure that my trains run on time, getting that done at the beginning of the week means that all that mental real estate that would have been devoted to worrying about all the stuff that wasn't getting done all week long, I don't have that anymore. And it makes me much more present and clear and focused when I'm with other people, because it's just not haunting my brain. So I would really encourage people to try and set aside Mondays to work on their own stuff, things that are meaningful, that's going to advance their business. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, take care of everyone else and be very client focused, and then use your Fridays for wrap up whenever possible. And if you can kind of stick to that, it helps mental health a lot.
Yeah, I'm sure it helps from a mental health perspective, but I think that's great. I think there's, I like what you said there from both of those angles. One, I think one of the things that easily gets lost is that idea of working on your own business. Right. So as things get hectic, the trap is you get stuck working in the business and kind of being your own employee and getting through all of the obligations and responsibilities that come with just getting work done. And you never end up having time, or the week gets away from you and you're not working on the business. You're not approaching it from that business owner or strategic standpoint. So I think you're right. I think doing that on Mondays kind of forces you. And like you said, while you have the mental capacity, kind of fresh start to the week, to do that and take that strategic approach to working on your business. The other thing I liked about what you said is that idea of then, again, freeing up that real estate to be kind of super present to work with clients or customers.
Absolutely.
Because I think that's really important. It's really hard to be at your best for yourself as the business owner and the clients. You're right, when everything's all kind of jumbled up and fired at you from all angles.
Right. No, I think, that's great advice. And, I've even found myself kind of over the years having a tendency to really work, whether it's on the business or, on myself, right? Kind of in that first thing in the morning. So kind of your same strategy, right? In the sense that it's the beginning of the week and then you kind of use the rest of the week. And I think I have found myself either working on our business and doing those types of things first thing in the morning, kind of before I get to any client interaction or anything of that nature. And I have found that does work, great. I think you're right. I think it clears the mind. It kind of gives you also that feeling of completion, and that things are in the right place, and that you can kind of move forward and really focus on providing your clients, and in our case, our accounting services, kind of uninterrupted and really with a clear mind.
Yes, and I'm sure you guys experience this in your meetings with your clients, that they're paying you for your expertise and you're giving them
Right.
really good advice that will advance them toward their goals. And when they're in front of you, they're excited, they're motivated, they get it, they know how important this is, and then they go back to their office and they get sucked into the storm.
Right.
And before you know it, you check on them, hey, did you get X, Y, and Z done? And they haven't. And so it's a twofold effect. If you don't set aside time to work on your business, not only do you have that disappointment of things always hanging over you, or that sense of stagnation, but you're actually not giving your business the nurturing that it needs to become fully realized.
Right.
Everyone goes into business with this vision of what they want it to be and what they want to use it for as a tool to accomplish things. And so the frustration is really profound when people can't get things done. And so like that one change in how they view their time and their energy can make a really huge difference.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, no, I think that is great. And that's, it's spot on, rock solid. Because, these small business owners, if they're going to succeed, they definitely are going to need that time to work on their business, but also evaluate their business. And
Yeah.
if they're constantly just kind of just doing the work of the business, they're never going to be able to really set some time aside to then evaluate, where they're going, where they've been, what kind of changes they need to make in terms of, do they need to tweak their business model in a way? Or is there a marketing opportunity that they need to focus on? And if they don't really kind of, set that time aside to do that, then it's really a lost opportunity at the end of the day. And then they're going to, like you said, they're going to kind of end up, wondering why things are not happening for them. But ultimately, it's because they didn't set that time aside and really manage their time properly to work on the business.
Yeah. No, sage advice for sure.
Yeah, and I think that another extension of this, and this is another topic that I know we're discussing this afternoon, is just, how do you overcome moments of fear?
Yeah,
as
let's
a
jump to
business
that.
owner?
That's fine.
And I think that, it's very much connected with how people make choices around how they spend their time. Because I think on one level, we all just get genuinely busy. It's easy to get distracted. It can be difficult to choose your priorities when so many things seem equally important. And so, there's that bucket that chaos pours into. But I think the other bucket sometimes is fear, because business owners are very hard on themselves. I think it does take an above average person to start a business. You have to have a certain tolerance for risk. You have to be really resourceful. You have to be willing to step into a leadership role and make difficult decisions. And that tends to naturally come with somewhat high standards, high expectations for conduct, for achievement, and whatnot. And so when we make the time to try to do something and it doesn't pan out as it does in our imagination, I think that there's a certain amount of fear or shame around that. And what I'd like to really encourage all business owners to do is to treat their business as if they're a scientist and their business is an experiment, right? Scientists are not ever permanently married to one way of being. They are constantly coming up with a theory, testing the theory, looking at what the evidence is telling them. And if what it's telling them is you're on the right track, then they continue down that track. But if the evidence tells them this isn't working out, they don't have fear or shame around that. They just accept the data for what it's telling them and change course. And as much as it's an emotional experience to be a business owner and to create something from scratch, and I would never imagine separating someone from that experience. I think we need to layer with that a more kind of experimental approach where there is no such thing as bad data. The only
Right.
bad thing is to not try or to ignore what the evidence is telling you. And I see that relate back very much to, again, people's choice to work in rather than on their business. Sometimes they're working in it not just out of necessity, but out of fear of change.
Yeah, I think, that those moments of fear, I think you're right. And, I know Sal and I have experienced, we say with all the topics we cover, one, we bring up the topics because we think they're relevant. Also, by the same token, we've experienced all these as small business owners ourselves, right? And
Right.
it's a dynamic and situation and kind of a constant thing, that those moments of fear where, um, like you said, you conceived of it one way in your head and how it was all going to play out, and then the data and evidence tells you something to the contrary. Um, and you're right. I mean, I felt it, where you feel a little bit paralyzed by that fear in that moment, but then you just have
Mm-hmm.
to. I think the way you put it is perfect. You've got to look at it and say, "Hey, I'm taking a scientific approach. I formulated a hypothesis. I put some steps into action. I've collected some data, and here's what it's telling me." And then, at that moment, you can either be paralyzed by that fear, which I don't know, at least for me, it's still going to happen. It's just how long it
Sure.
lasts.
Sure.
Um,
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
so it's going to happen. But then, in terms of it not lasting that long, I think you're right, Stephanie. It's about, okay, well, what is the data telling me?
Right.
And what is that, tweak to the business model, as Sal mentioned earlier, or pivot point that I look to next? And how do I use this data in an advantageous way,
Mm-hmm.
and move forward? Because I think that's what a lot of the small business owners want to do. I mean, you're right. It takes a special
Yeah.
person, so they kind of have that
Right.
dogged determination. So if they follow the data, they're probably just going to use it, to propel themselves forward. I don't
Right.
think. I think the type of the makeup of the entrepreneur or business owner is such that, they want to keep pushing on, or trudging forward. It's just, to your point, are they using the data in a good way, to do that,
Yes.
instead of being paralyzed by that fear if things don't pan
Correct.
out the way
Yeah.
they
No,
thought they would?
I agree. Stephanie, I think, you bring up a very good point about, fear, and it is scary, right? It's scary to be in your own business. It's scary to
Mm-hmm.
be, if you're somewhat on your own, solopreneur. And I think that does happen where, because it is scary, because there is a fear factor, they end up falling back on just working in the business because that's
Yes.
easier, right? It's
Yes.
easier for me to just kind of work in the business and not really kind of think about all those other elements because they're scary. And so I think it's good advice to let them know that, hey, this is a reality of owning a business, and because of that, here's an approach like you mentioned. I think if you can game plan it, or think of it, as a scientist and an experimentation, and you're constantly making changes, and you have to carve out the right amount of time to do that analysis, and kind of sit back and say, okay, what went right, what went wrong, what can I change, what do I need to
Mm-hmm.
adjust, and I think ultimately that will take the fear or the scariness, out of the equation. I think if you treat it like you mentioned, I think that's great advice. Treat it like a scientist. It's an experiment, and you're moving forward with all of your data, right or wrong, good or bad. You're continuing to move
Yes.
forward.
and and know that it's okay to be scared. I think that
Yeah.
sometimes it's almost like if you experience fear or anxiety about substantial financial decisions and things that affect not just your business but your family. Like, if you can't just sort of have a stiff upper lip about it all the time, that there's cracks in your armor. And that is not the case. And you are going to experience fear, and you are going to experience moments of anxiety. But I think, as you each touched on, it's how long you dwell there that matters. And Tim Ferriss has a really interesting TED Talk about this. And I don't know if you guys have seen this, but he suffers, I believe he's treated for bipolar. The anxiety and depression, he gets very manic. And he said when he was younger, he would go through periods of very intense anxiety. And one of the ways that he's learned to manage this over the years is he comes up with a fear game plan. Mm-hmm. So he recognizes when these feelings are starting to come up, and when the emotion is starting to make the decisions rather than the rationality. So he acknowledges that his feelings are valid, but he doesn't want to get stuck there. So he starts to play what's the worst that can happen. And he imagines the worst case scenario, and then he starts with, okay, what do I not have any control over in this situation? And then he moves to, what do I have control over? Then he moves into, if I have control over that, then what steps can I take? And he's very specific in the actions that he can choose. And then kind of the final stage is, I've empowered myself to the extent that I have power over this scenario, and the rest of it is just about acceptance and knowing that regardless of what happens, A, I did my best, and B, I have enough resiliency that I will recover from whatever occurs. So making himself use his kind of that manic imagination as to give himself agency rather than to freak himself out is something that he's cultivated over time. And I thought that was a really great piece of advice.
Yeah, it's it is. And I think no matter how the individual chooses to go through that process, to your earlier point, I think it's about, whether it's that technique in and of itself or another way of getting there where the end result is, I'm going to focus on what I do have control over and those actionable steps for the sake of, like you said earlier, not getting stuck there. I mean, I know for me, just even us acknowledging out loud, just as we're talking, like the idea that fear exists, right, and that me being able to say this, it makes me feel better, right? It's kind of like this little secret that we all keep, right? Like we all, especially business owners, because I think it's like, who doesn't want to project, especially in the world we live in. We live in the social media age, right? Like everybody's look at my perfect family, look at my perfect life, my perfect business is just another element to that, right? So I think even us just saying this, like acknowledging that fear is real, specifically in small business. We all feel it. It's common to all of us. And I think just saying that out loud sometimes, or sharing that with somebody, or being able to converse, or doing this exercise you mentioned that Tim Ferriss has developed, or just having a strategy like that, I think when those moments of fear come, it goes a long way in not getting stuck there, like you said, Stephanie.
It's like believing in the scary monster that lives in your closet, but when you turn the light on and you really look at it, there isn't anything going on in there that you can't deal with.
Right.
That's very true.
Maybe it's just a really scary pile of laundry.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
And, just to kind of close out that topic, there is that added pressure with respect to being in your own business, and there's the fear of failure, but also there's a tremendous amount of, like I mentioned, a lot of pressure to succeed. And I think that definitely, kind of Anthony mentioned it too as well, as far as, there's the facade of success, but then there's actually, some actual, you have to, you want to be successful. And
Yes.
I think that adds a tremendous amount of pressure, and that adds to the fear. So I think, you're right. I mean, if you can approach it, whether it's, as you mentioned, Tim Ferriss and how he does it, or another method, I think that's going to really, really help a small business owner be successful, or give them an opportunity to be successful. One of the other things is that, I think thus far we've talked about kind of, the solopreneur. You're on your own, you're doing things and kind of by yourself, so that's scary as well. But there could be an opportunity where you could bring on some folks to help you with your business. As we talked about before we went on air, with respect to having a team.
Yes.
Yeah, so let's now transition to that topic. So one of the other things you had told us, Stephanie, and we can definitely discuss this in the context of, that smaller solopreneur who needs a team. I know there's definitely business owners out there who have employees and consider and rightfully so, utilize them as part of their team. But the other topic we wanted to talk about that you had brought up, that you encounter a lot with, is the idea of building a team, and building more specifically a resilient team.
Yes.
So tell us some of your thoughts about that and how you kind of work through that with business owners.
Well, I think, you can have a business, like you said, you're either going to employ people, or if you're a solopreneur, you might not have employees, but chances are you are surrounded by vendors, advisors, contractors. You have a lot more people in your orbit than you might think. And so even a solopreneur isn't doing every last thing precisely by themselves. We all have, thank God, accountants, business attorneys, a graphic designer, someone who handles our web and our IT. And so, and I'll transition to employees here in a sec, but even if you're a solopreneur, make sure you have a really good team in place, professionals who help fill in the gaps in your knowledge. I need financial planning. I need business advice from my attorney. I need really good insurance agents who make sure I have the coverage that I need for my risk management, and so on and so forth. So there's no reason you can't have a team of advisors in place who help elevate your business, even if you don't have employees. Now, if you do have employees, there's a couple of things I would really encourage people to do. One is, it's really important to think about the roles that you need people to play, what kind of skill sets are typical to those roles, and match a person's nature to the right role. If you think an extrovert can happily sit behind a desk in isolation all day and crank tasks, like no one's going to be happy.
Right.
And if you think an introvert is going to go out and do outside sales for you, nobody's going to be happy. And I think, part of what I love about business owners, and I am this way myself, I'm a relentless optimist. And so we're always seeing the potential of what could be. And that's what makes us business owners. I mean, that's the business gene. I think the other side of that is that sometimes we can overestimate that someone has in order to do a job, because we like them. We want them to have a place in our company, even if the place that we have available doesn't really suit them. So
do you encourage business owners in that regard with employees? Because I think you're right. I think there's the tendency to be a little bit optimistic in terms of the potential there. I see that all the time with business owners myself, and a lot of times I'm just it might not have a finance or accounting element, but I have I get to be because I'm interacting with them, I'm somewhat of a spectator, right? And I'm like,
Yes.
That's not what I'm seeing, but what do I know? I'm just standing here.
Yeah.
But do you encourage them then in that regard to, what's the best way to make sure you as the business owner, your own kind of eternal optimist mindset is not misleading you? Is it to truly sit down and talk and engage more with that employee to see if they really have the will? How do you advise with employees specifically? How do you advise business owners to approach that so that it's not just their optimistic thinking, like you said, and then the employee turns out, even if there was the potential for the introvert to be a little bit more extroverted, there wasn't the will
Right.
there to do that, you know?
I think there's a few things. I mean, starting with the hiring process, I would have more than one person interview a candidate.
Okay.
I think it's always very interesting to have different types of people interview an applicant because they are going to catch different things. And if you can kind of reconcile two or three different points of view and still at the end of the day come out with the conclusion that this person looks like a good fit, you're going to make a stronger hire. And this goes back to the whole concept of an experiment, because you really don't know for sure whether someone's going to be a good fit until you test drive
Sure.
them.
Sure.
Right. I mean, I remember the company that I worked for before I started my own practice, and I would interview someone. Their resume would be great. They would give a very solid interview. I would hire them and I would tell them exactly what the job entailed, and maybe the particular difficulties of some of the accounts, the complexities that we would have them working on. And they'd say, oh yeah, I love to be busy. I hate being bored. There's nothing worse than watching the clock. And then 2 days into the job, I see them like running for the parking lot with their mug, right? And like never
Right.
to be heard from again.
Yeah.
So it's never going to be a guarantee when you hire someone, but what you can do is your due diligence. So your due diligence includes have more than one person interview the applicant. Due diligence, if you'd like, might include behavioral analysis. I do DISC assessments for my clients when they are hiring. They reach their top 2 or 3 candidates, and we do DISC assessments to see what are their natural skills, what are their natural strengths, make sure that they align with the role that we're hiring for. Because we want to set them up to be successful. We don't want to set up people for frustration. I have a statistic on my website. The average American works 90,000 hours over the course of their life. So I really feel like I'm on some sort of a mission, not only to help business owners not go crazy and to feel really fulfilled by those 90,000 hours. And also when you employ someone, in as much as you have control over it, you need to help other people find success and fulfillment in what they're doing. So that starts by the right tush in the right seat.
Right.
And then the next step of due diligence is making sure that you are articulating your expectations. And this is another kind of tip that I give all of my clients. When you are hiring someone, make sure you have milestones for progress, because it's been a while. If you're a business owner, it's probably been a while since you've worked for somebody else. I actually remember my first day of employment ever. And you're walking into an office that is foreign to you. You don't even know where the bathroom is. You don't know where the kitchen is. I mean, we're talking the most rudimentary stuff that makes your day comfortable is new to you. You're meeting all of these new people. You're trying to put faces with names. You're trying to learn the ins and outs of your job. You want to make a good impression. There's a lot going on in the psyche of a new employee. And so if we can set up milestones and say, okay, Anthony, Sal, it's your first day on the job. I want to let you know that in the first 15 days, we're going to have you concentrate on X. and expect you to have reasonable proficiency after those 2 weeks. The next thing we'll have you work on from like day 16 to 30 is going to be why, and so on and so forth. So by the time they're done with their 90-day probationary period, they know from the start kind of what the arc of their progress should look like and how they should be focusing their attention, instead of just putting them in a position where they're triaging everything new,
Right.
and then being
Yeah.
frustrated that they don't seem to be gaining any traction. I see employers set new employees up for failure over and over and over again. And I think we just need to use our imaginations a little bit and remember what it's like to be new on the job.
Yeah, that's a good
Yeah,
point.
no, it's a very good point. I think, Anthony and I laugh because, we see it firsthand.
Yeah.
We see it with our clients, and I think, you brought up some great points in that I think there's this balance between a business owner, an employee, and they may like that person, and that may be one of the driving reasons that they want them to be an employee. But in fact, ultimately, like you mentioned, if you don't lay out those expectations right from the get-go, you're really doing a disservice to the employee and to yourself, because you may have this natural bias that, hey, I kind of like this person. I see myself at the bar with this person, or in a different setting. But the reality is that you need that person to do a specific task, to work a specific process. So you really have to start with that. So
Yeah.
I think that's a great point. And
Yeah, is it a skill set match?
Exactly.
And then, like you said, I know it. Sal and I are a little bit lucky because, again, being able to be the outside observers, I know even us just the last little while, on the employee side, in terms of tasks, we've made a much more conscious effort of laying out those expectations, like you said, 15 days, 30 days. But here's the thing: we're not geniuses. We learn by doing it wrong before, and then observing
haven't we all?
others, right? So, but the point being, there's extreme truth to you saying that. I think without those, approaching it with that expectation lens does two things. To your point, it sets the employee up for success because they know it's crystal clear what they're supposed to kind of be doing and kind of targeting mastery over in terms of tasks. I think to Sal's point too, it's keeping you focused. It's keeping you focused on tasks and task oriented, and less maybe leaning towards that bias of, I just
Sure.
like this person personally, because I think you're right, Sal. I think a lot of times we're like, I like this person, but then to Stephanie's point, you're not necessarily thinking about their skill set, their personality, whether or not that
Exactly.
fit is there.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, and I think also, you brought up that other point with respect to having different folks interview, that particular candidate. And I think that is a great, really spot on, point in that, people interact differently with different people, right? And really, when that employee knows that either you're the business owner or you're the boss, they may put themselves or act a certain way, as where if you have them interviewed with someone else, or there could be other items that come out of their, whether it's their personality or their job skill set or anything of that nature, because they may be a little bit more comfortable in talking about some of those items with someone else. And so you do learn, I think, quite a bit by getting that other perspective. And it helps with the whole bias piece, right? Where
because we all have different perceptions. I
Sure.
think you're right, Stephanie. I mean, you could interview somebody and I could interview them, but to your point, if we were to talk about it after the fact, would we be able to reconcile, kind of like you said, to the point, kind of reconcile our observations? Or is my perception completely different than yours? And if so, why? So I think that's always going to be a healthy exercise for the business owners to go through. I might not see something you see, vice versa, or my perception of one thing might be different. So I'm sure that comes up when you employ that, when business owners employ that tactic, that whoever that other person is that they have participating in the interview either brings a completely different perspective or pulls out some sort of nugget, or maybe to Sal's point, the candidate perceived or was less or more comfortable with that person, but all of this just yielded more information. To go back to what you were saying about using that scientific data-based approach,
Exactly.
all of this is yielding more information and data.
Right.
Yes. And I think, part of that element of having somebody else in the room, if you can have someone who isn't as directly affected by the hire, because here's what I also see happen is the owner or the manager, whoever the person is who's looking to get some relief because their plate is full or they're doing double duty because you're short staffed. The person who's most desperate to fill the position is usually the one who's doing the interview.
Yeah,
And everyone has a breaking point, right? I've done this. I mean, everybody reaches the point where it's like, oh God, you fog a mirror. Awesome.
Yeah, you've got a pulse. You're hired.
Yeah, exactly. You're in. Let's get that new employee paperwork going. But that just compounds the problem, because I see business owners all the time, instead of looking at what the data is telling them and kind of just hiring ahead of need. And there's always kind of that point where, you just about have the money to support the payroll, but you're never going to grow unless you bring somebody on, right? So we all reach that friction point with our business. But the advantage to hiring just ahead of need means you're not so at capacity that this poor human being comes through the door who probably doesn't know you, doesn't know your style, doesn't know your business, may not even know your industry, but you're so desperate to get some relief that you treat them as if they have ESP and just start throwing stuff at them and say, figure it out, and then get ticked off when, you've said sink or swim and they're sinking. I see this over and over again, and it's just such an exercise in frustration for everyone involved. So I beg everyone listening to this, stop the madness.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. Great advice.
To close out this kind of topic of building a resilient team, I'm going to be a little bit selfish here, Stephanie, because this is something that I encounter a lot, that as a vendor is a source of frustration for me. But beyond me, me and Sal being vendors, let's say as accounting professionals or CPAs, this is something that I notice does become an issue, or is an issue for a lot of business owners. So I'm interested to get your take on it, and that is,
you bet,
whether whether it's an employee you would be hiring. It could be challenging or promoting an existing employee that you think has the ability to kind of step up, take on more, and wants that. Or it could be that idea, like we talked about earlier, of hiring those outside vendors, or if you're the solopreneur, or building that really good team of professionals around you. I know there is, obviously financial constraints to a lot of business owners, or financial constraints are a consideration. One of the other things I also noticed, though, is that there's this disconnect between, earlier we talked about working on the business, and I think one of the things that's fundamental to working on the business is understanding that you need a certain level of infrastructure, not only to operate currently, but to evolve and grow. And of course, let's be honest, the name of the game in business, there's a great sense of fulfillment that comes from business and rising to the challenge and pride. But most people are we're in a profit generating mode here, right? We've got a profit motive. So the idea of spending extra dollars, whether it's on building the professional team of vendors, hiring making that good hire that you really should, promoting somebody, giving somebody a raise, a lot of times I know that financial element deters a lot of business owners from building that resilient team. How do you, what are your thoughts on that, and how do you kind of coach business owners through that, like not letting the dollars always get in the way of taking those steps?
That is such a great question, because that's a really common challenge. And usually where I like to start the conversation is going back to, what are our goals here? And what is the real purpose of the business? And this is where business owners have to be crystal clear with themselves about what they really want from their business versus starting to compare their success with other people's appearance of success. If you have a business and it's in the same industry and somebody's going gangbusters and you're still relatively small, asking yourself, oh, well, is my business supposed to look like this over here? I mean, how am I going to get there, and how am I going to stretch? The question to really ask is, do I want to be like that other company? Do I even want to be that big? And so everything needs to be aligned with what we really want, because nobody starts a business to create a situation for themselves they don't want, right? I mean, most of us start a business because we saw a better way of doing something. And so we created an avenue for ourselves to be able to do that. So I think going back to your why, why did I start this business? What is really my purpose? What was I hoping to achieve? And answering those questions, revisiting those answers, and then saying, okay, if it's going to take employees in order for me to do that, then what I'd say, and I think you gentlemen will like this answer, I always encourage people to visit with their accountants and do some financial benchmarking, because it may very well be that you're going to have to pick up an employee, like you're just teetering on the precipice, right? We're breaking even, we're not super profitable, but based on our analysis and how much market share we have to gain and how much momentum we've had over the last 6 to 12 months, things are trending in the right direction. You ride the wave in the direction it's going, right? So consult with your accountant, do some performance benchmarking, figure out what do you have to hit revenue-wise, or better still, net profit-wise, before you could absorb the risk of taking on an employee. And then when you do take on that employee, for all the reasons we've already discussed, you want to make sure you're setting that person up for success, because you are investing time, energy, and money in that person so that they will help pay for themselves as quickly as possible. So from start to finish, like the most essential first step with all of that is being very connected with your purpose, whether it's the purpose of the business, the purpose in hiring the employee, or the purpose of the role that the employee is supposed to fulfill and bring revenue back into the business. So this is another reason to have very good accountants on your team.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think going through that analysis, stopping and going through that analysis is just something that I know a lot of. It's almost like, I get it as a business owner. With all we've talked about, it can be tempting that you're like, oh, that's the last thing I feel like doing. But I think you're right. You're right in that, and Sal and I have talked in other content we've put out about revisiting your why, or just, defining what your why is. And I think a lot of times your why doesn't need, it doesn't necessarily, it's got financial and non-financial elements. And the reason I say that, bring that up, is that you said you might look at a competitor, right? And to your point, you don't necessarily want to be like them in terms of scale, transaction volume, gross revenue, employee count, because it doesn't align with your why.
Exactly.
Your why might be a completely different combination of a financial component and a work-life balance component, whereas the profit motive for the competitor company you're looking at is completely different, and that's why they're trying to scale to a different level and achieve a different type of sales volume. So I think
Right.
starting with your why, I think, is important in that regard to make sure, one, you're not comparing apples to oranges, but two, to your point, to help you wrap your head around now that I'm refocused on my why, I can make a decision instead of just only on financial elements. Is this advancing the ball, or is this getting me closer to realizing my why and those goals for my business? Whether it's investing, like you said, in the employee you need, or building the team of contractors, like what's going to advance the ball
Exactly.
towards me realizing that why.
Right. No, that's a great point. And one of the items that you touched on, Stephanie, and you just mentioned as well, Anthony, is potentially it may not be an employee route that you go down, and you may end up looking for some of these vendors that can provide certain services.
Yes.
It seems like more and more, and every day that goes by, it's almost like there's pretty much nothing out there that can't be found through a vendor, right? In that, people are really specializing in different type of services, even professional services. And you can, as a small business owner, you can use that to your advantage, because it does take, when you do use a vendor, and you have that vendor client type relationship, you can really task that vendor with certain processes that you want done. And,
Yes.
and I think when you're doing it that way, you take away that element of the employee, the kind of the biases that you might have with an employee, or because you're going to be working with a particular employee and potentially seeing them on a day-to-day basis, and you're going to have personality issues, you can eliminate a lot of that stuff by looking for and utilizing a vendor. And I think that does really help, especially a smaller solopreneur that's just getting started, before they need that whole department of X amount of employees, to really explore that vendor element, because I think those vendors are providing a service, and if they don't do it well, I think it's easy for the business owner to say, hey, I'm going to move on to the next vendor that provides this same service. So I think that it's great. It's great advice, and I think that there's a lot of opportunity nowadays, because especially with this gig economy, there's pretty much from graphic design to accountants, there's pretty much there's nothing out there that can't be kind of carved up and sold in terms of a vendor type service or relationship.
Yes, and I think you hit the nail on the head with, not only are you getting the services of someone who has a very specific area of expertise, but it was a very astute observation to say the accountability factor comes much more easily, especially
Oh yeah.
if someone is adverse to confrontation, whether real or perceived. There are a lot of people who they're very relationship oriented, and one of the most difficult things for them with respect to having employees is the prospect of having to fire someone. They don't want the confrontation. They don't. It feels messy to them. Whereas, exactly as you said, if you're using the services of a vendor, especially maybe as that baby step,
Yeah.
like with you guys, you come in, you get the books set up. Maybe somebody doesn't need a full-time bookkeeper because their business isn't at that size yet, but they
Right.
use you to get the structure of everything as it should be in place. And it's like rent a CFO instead of having to pay
Yeah.
for a full-time comptroller that you don't even need yet.
Yeah.
And this lets them cut their teeth in a way that's got far less risk and a lot of upside.
I agree. I agree. No, that's a great point.
Absolutely.
That baby step
Absolutely.
option is
Yep.
available, and I think to close the loop on it, I think you're right. If you start with your why, it's those two options are going to become available to you mentally, and you're going to be in a better position to kind of think through what the next best step is. Um, so I'm going to wrap up and Stephanie, we talked about some great stuff today, and I noticed a lot of it in terms of those time management strategies, overcoming those moments of fear, building the resilient team. My one big takeaway, and I want to thank you, is really this idea of you know approaching this stuff with that kind of I liked your analogy of the scientist. Okay. No, I think it's great because
I'm glad.
all of these things we talked about, if you conceive of them in that way, that you are doing this experiment and you are gathering this data, it takes some of that fear away.
Yeah.
It can lead you in the direction of staying focused on working on the business, not just in the business. It can help you build that resilient team. I mean, I think it's just a good frame of mind for business owners to think about it that way. That this isn't a static thing. This is a dynamic process. There's a lot of learning to do along the way, and I think you talked about it very intelligently in a way that I think anybody who's listening can use some of these strategies and it'll help them.
Yeah, I agree
I'm
100%. I
glad.
agree. Yeah, Stephanie,
Thank you.
fantastic. Tell us or let everyone know how would someone get a hold of you and get even more nuggets.
Because I know you post a lot too. I've seen some of your stuff on social media, and it's
Yeah.
great. So tell us a little bit about where they can find your contact info and stuff like that.
Oh, you bet. You can go to my website. It's therisingeffect.com. And if you scroll down on the homepage just a scotch, you'll see an icon there that you can click on, and it will take you to my online calendar. And there's an option for a one-to-one consult. That's just a free complimentary hour. You can ask whatever questions you need to about coaching, share with me whatever you need to about your business. And it gives me a chance to hear more about what's going on with you, what your challenges are. And if I feel that it's something that's outside of my particular wheelhouse, I am doggedly determined to get people the help that they're looking for, and I will connect you with a colleague who can help you.
Fantastic.
That's awesome.
Stephanie, thank you for your time. All valuable. All the information you brought to the table, I think, is something that any small business owner could use and use to be successful.
Yeah, like I said before, sage advice
Thank
for
you.
sure. So thanks so much, Stephanie. We really appreciate you being with us today.
I appreciate you having me. I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you both.
Likewise, thank you.
Thank you.